Today I'm tackling one straight out of the comments section. Do you need to have an amateur wrestling background if you want to be a professional wrestler? I'm Mike Quackenbush, and this is Till We Make It. Here on my channel, I make videos for fellow professional wrestlers at every single stage of their careers. And if you happen to be passionate about pro wrestling, and you're never done learning all about it, then you have landed in the exact right place. So, join the Till We Make It tribe. Subscribe down below, and enable notifications by ringing that bell. You may find notifications are hiding in your settings, but I assure you, it's worthwhile to do this. To answer the question, do professional wrestlers need to have an amateur wrestling background, whether that's from freestyle or Olympic style wrestling or some other folk style of wrestling, to find real success? Well, the short answer to that is no. Before becoming a professional wrestler, John Cena was a football player and then a bodybuilder. And that lack of an amateur wrestling background in no way impacted his ability to find success as a pro wrestler. Before becoming involved in professional wrestling, Becky Lynch was interested in horseback riding and swimming, and that lack of an amateur wrestling background in no way, shape, or form impacted her ability to find success in professional wrestling. So the short answer, of course, is no, but there's also a longer answer. Having a working knowledge of the fundamentals of the grappling arts, like you would get from studying Olympic wrestling or from the martial art judo, would give you a great advantage when you get into the squared circle. But that is by no means a prerequisite for becoming a professional wrestler or finding success as a sports entertainer. I would put that skill set on even par with things like having good acting skills or being a polished public speaker, which are other key elements of being a successful professional wrestler. Back in the era of kayfabe 1.0, entering the world of professional wrestling with an amateur wrestling background was seen as desirable because it lent credence to the idea that pro wrestling was a legitimate evolution from amateur wrestling. But it's not. And we don't live in the era of kayfabe 1.0 anymore. Professional wrestling is written in advance and then performed by highly skilled athletes who deliver it as convincingly as possible. Possessing even an entry-level understanding of how grappling arts look and feel will draw this into immediate clarity. There's a reason why a match that you see on AEW and a match that you see on UFC feel completely different, because they are completely different. To be clear, there are elements in professional wrestling today which really are rooted in some of the most ancient forms of grappling on Earth. The full Nelson as we know it today is the same as a full Nelson was 100 years ago, is the same as the full Nelson was 200 years ago. But there are parts of the modern pro wrestling lexicon of physical mechanics which are not particularly rooted in ancient forms of grappling, and that is because they were all made up by one guy, Toots Mondt. Back in the 1920s, pro wrestling's popularity had hit a real slump. The public perception was that wrestling matches could be sluggish, boring affairs that would drag on for hours. And Toots Mondt sought to solve for this with two innovations of his own design. Number one, he was the first to institute time limits on pro wrestling matches. And number two, he just made up a slew of exciting new moves, like the body slam, the elbow drop, and the suplex. With the influence of his business partners, Ed Lewis and Billy Sandow, he was able to spread this new style of professional wrestling across the United States, and it became an almost instant hit. By the 1930s, people just accepted that this was what pro wrestling looked like now. Toots Mondt almost single-handedly rewrote pro wrestling's vocabulary. As if the influence Mondt wielded as one-third of the legendary Gold Dust Trio, no, with his business partners Sandow and Lewis weren't enough, he gains an even stronger foothold in professional wrestling history when he partners with Vince McMahon Sr., one of the first promoters to fully appreciate the power of television. When McMahon rebrands his Capital Wrestling Corporation as the WWF in the 1960s, Toots Mondt is right there beside him. The professional wrestling that the McMahon family empire broadcasts each and every week, including up to right now, is in some ways just a bunch of stuff one guy made up because he thought wrestling was too boring. The truth is, what goes in the ring today owes as much to the kung fu movie craze of the 1970s, or the golden age of superhero movies, as it does to sumo wrestling, or to the folk styles of wrestling you would have seen in the lumber camps of the Pacific Northwest back in the Great Depression. It's important to appreciate, though, coming into professional wrestling with a legitimate understanding of grappling arts or martial arts will only make you better equipped to understand everything that came before, to synthesize what's going on in pro wrestling right now, or to better prepare you for whatever is about to be created next. To better understand how we got to right now, plug my audiobook right into your ears. Pro Wrestling History, 6 Threads and 16 Decades is a roller coaster ride from the end of the US Civil War right up to the main event of WrestleMania 35. We're going to trace 6 unique innovations and the impact that they had on this crazy thing we all love.